Welcome to week 6, everybody. This week we're going to be thinking about language that lives. We're going to be talking specifically about etymology and the histories of words and their meanings, as well as thinking more about hermeneutic interpretation and writing, and thinking about the essences of things, so the thisness and thatness of things, as we began speaking about last week with Sylvia. We're also going to be thinking about inquiry questions and preparing for your inquiry proposals, and you'll be discussing more of this in your virtual collaboratories. So to do this week, you're going to be completing portfolio entry 4, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. That's due Sunday at 11:55 p.m. You're also going to be submitting your inquiry proposal on or before October 25th at midnight. And I'm going to give a little bit more information about the proposal in a moment. And then you'll also be participating in your virtual collaboratory. And I've posted prompts to guide the discussion around your inquiry proposals and composing research questions on eLearn for you, so you can take a look at that. So to start today, let's think again about portfolio entry 3 and revisiting some of your processes with photography. So thinking about photography, you're taking a view and you're engaging with perspectives and ways of seeing. So last week, you experimented with photography as research, as method, and as inquiry. So you were considering how will you look at or enter into this idea or object? What are you looking for with a particular pedagogical intention, framing what it is that you're seeing? And also, what will you focus on? You've articulated an initial orientation in your photography practices, while knowing that openness to experience isn't empty and it doesn't begin with nothing. So you're beginning and you're not looking with an empty lens, you're looking from somewhere with a particular orientation. And as we discussed last week, and in the weeks before, you don't come at research from nowhere or from within a vacuum. As a photographer and as a researcher and as an educator, you'll actively make choices of what it is that you're looking at and how you're deciding to look at it. So these choices are informed by your perception, and your perception is grounded in a particular way of viewing the world. So an act of seeing has pedagogical intentions in this sense. So in your inquiry assignments, you'll need to articulate this orientation as well, as you've been doing in your portfolio entries. And though you're hopefully arriving to the phenomenon that you're inquiring about with an openness to being affected by a moment of inquiry, openness again doesn't necessarily mean emptiness or neutrality. You're arriving with an intention, with a purpose in taking the photo. And you're also looking with, rather than looking at. You're trying to look alongside something to create a relation with what it is that's being photographed. You're not merely looking and capturing something in its entirety. So in last week's portfolio entry 3, you worked through 2 events and revisited the photos and emerging propositions as a group in your virtual collaboratories. You considered, what do images do? What sense did you make of the images? What presented itself? And what did you see? And these are all questions that you'll be continuing to consider in your inquiry project. So carrying this intentionality in how you take photos, which photos you decide to select to speak with the hermeneutic text of your inquiry all matters. So carry with you these propositions. So we're thinking about images as and in research. And you're thinking about relationships between art, artist, viewer, and context. So thinking about the supplemental reading by Gillian Rose in week 4, she speaks to how an image is situated in a relational experience. An image is not purely representational of what's being photographed. In taking and viewing a photo, this comes to matter in relation with others and within a particular context. So its composition is based on the relations of art, artist, viewer, and context. It's not a static representation of something. And as Sylvia discussed in our last meeting, meaning is made at the site of production, image, and audience. Meaning is not pre-existing the moment of interactions where the viewer engages with the photo and contextual experience. So these aspects, the technological, compositional, the social, are what creates the performance and makes the image in research livable. So we're thinking about photography and photos as performative. So Rose's chapter speaks to the experience of viewing a photo. She draws on Haraway in conceptualizing seeing and viewing beyond the traditional sense of the sense, disrupting the capitalist image that flattens the depth of time and space into something surface, something palatable, easily digested, and quickly consumed. So in reading this, I was reminded of billboard ads or images in a catalog that represent or that present a quick representation of something that sort of cuts it off from its relational complexities, from its home, from where it actually came from, and its lived qualities. So the object photographed is easily appropriated and consumed as a static, receivable truth. The meaning is intended to be universal, and it exists in isolation. But with Sylvia, we attended to the multiplicities at play in the experience of taking and viewing visual documentation. And Rose's chapter specifically reminds us of Barthes' notion of the death of the author, where the idea of authorship sort of needs to be rethought. If text, image, and art are considered as a meeting place of multiple actors beyond the individual self, then this paints a very different image of the author, or in our case, as an educator, as her work is done, not done in isolation, nor does it solely belong to her. Barthes argued that this signals the death of the author. Each word, rewrite, comes with a history attached, and each thought that you think or that we think is informed by a long history of thinking and thoughts that came before us, all the aspects of the moment as it's encountered now. So acts of making, including photography and writing as well, are never done in isolation. So we can consider this relational quality not only in the making of a piece of artwork, but also in its performance, how an experience of viewing the piece is intimately informed and formed with multiple components beyond the viewer's eye. So the performance is enacted with place, time, material, and others. All of the components that come together in that moment of viewing. Yet when we think about the act of making and viewing, this does not necessarily mean that there are no accountabilities to what we think or share, but rather that our ways of seeing come from somewhere, and that we're implicated in this act of seeing and producing as we actively interpret the essence of something and try to elucidate this essence by choosing a particular aspect to look at and representing it in ways which invite multiple interpretations. So to give what Van Eyck and Winter call a subjective feel whose meaning may not be fully capturable. And this is something that we can think together with in your inquiry proposals as well. So this week we're going to focus on languages of inquiry, particularly written languages, and the etymological significance of particular words. And we're going to pick this up again next week as well. So this week we're going to focus more on languages of inquiry as they come to matter in your living inquiry projects, and how you'll be putting to work these ideas that we've been discussing so far in the course. So you're using hermeneutic descriptions to transform lived experience into a textual expression of its essence, as Van Manen says, in such a way that the effect of the text is like a reliving of the meaningful aspects of the event. In reading this text back, we're animated in that very particular lived moment. We're reliving it. And in this sense, the process of hermeneutic writing is the creation of memory revisited, and with a gesture to meaning that is emerging here. Van Manen speaks to a way of constructing texts, gathering, reflecting, and reconsidering a phenomenon in a search for meaning, for meaningfulness and the nature of a specific experience. So it operates beyond mere description, and this writing opens up dimensions of the life world through poetics. It allows us to move beyond the literal of what is actually happening to situate our thinking in terms of what might be happening here, what might matter here pedagogically. So the aesthetic and effective qualities and significance of particular words matter over others. Each word is a very particular pedagogical decision.